The red flags appeared before sunrise. Elena saw them from the kitchen window, cutting across the eastern field in a crooked line. By the time she reached the road, Grant Mercer was already waiting beside his truck. Two cooperative workers stood behind him with a yellow herbicide tank. Grant pointed toward the tallest sorghum. Dark red stalks rose above the commercial crop. Their leaves were wider. Their grain heads were fuller. They were also the only plants that still looked healthy. "What are the flags for?" Elena asked. "Every plant that has to be destroyed." Grant handed her a field notice. The cooperative had supplied the approved seed, fertilizer, and fuel. In return, Elena had agreed to deliver a uniform crop. These red plants were not uniform. "They're off-type," Grant said. "Different height, different color, different maturity. They're surviving. That doesn't make them marketable." Elena looked across the field. The approved sorghum had begun curling from the heat. Lower leaves were turning brown. The irrigation pump had failed 2 days earlier, and no rain was expected. The red plants remained upright. Grant opened the contract. "If this grain mixes with the delivery, the cooperative can reject the entire harvest. You don't know that it will mix." "I know it isn't our seed." Elena said nothing. The seed had come from an old glass jar in her father's storage room. She had planted it after a storm ruined several bags of commercial seed. The jar had no variety name, only 4 words in her father's handwriting. "Don't mix these." Grant set the herbicide tank at her feet. "Spray them today. Disc the marked rows tomorrow. And if I don't, we cancel the purchase agreement." The crop was collateral for the farm's operating loan. Without the cooperative payment, Elena would miss the bank deadline. The farm would be gone before winter. She crouched beside the nearest red plant and pressed her fingers into the soil. Cool. Then she tested the ground beneath the commercial sorghum 1 row away. Dry. Grant watched her. "This isn't an experiment." Elena gripped the red stalk and pulled. It did not move. She dug around the base with her hands. The roots passed through the hard clay layer that stopped the commercial crop. Grant folded the contract. "You have until tomorrow evening." He returned to his truck. Before leaving, he looked back at the field. "I don't want to see a single red stalk standing." The truck disappeared down the road. Elena remained beside the marked plants. The approved crop was dying above dry ground. The plants Grant wanted destroyed had found moisture beneath it. She carried the herbicide tank into the shed and locked the door. Then she returned to the field with a shovel. 3 months earlier, Elena had returned to Ward Farm for her father's funeral. She planned to stay 2 days. Then she found the bank notice. The farm carried more debt than the land was worth. 2 failed seasons had drained the operating account, and the final payment was due after the fall harvest. Thomas Reed from the bank gave her one choice. "Produce a profitable crop," he said, "or sell before foreclosure begins." Elena looked through the office window at the dry fields. "How long do I have?" "1 season." That afternoon, she signed a contract with Grant Mercer's cooperative. They would provide commercial sorghum seed, fertilizer, and fuel on credit. Elena would deliver the entire harvest to them. The agreement required 1 approved variety, no substitutions, no mixed grain, no unregistered seed. It was the safest plan available. 2 weeks before planting, a storm tore open the roof of the storage shed. Rain soaked several bags of commercial seed. By morning, enough seed for 8 acres had begun swelling inside the torn bags. Grant inspected the damage. "You'll need replacements. Add them to the account." "No more credit." Elena stared at him. "If I plant fewer acres, I won't make the bank payment." "That isn't the cooperative's problem." After he left, Elena searched the farm for anything she could sell. In a narrow storage room behind her father's workbench, she found shelves of old glass jars. Most were labeled corn, beans, clover. One jar was not. It contained dark red sorghum seed. Some grains were brown, others copper or nearly black. The only writing was on the lid. "Don't mix these." Elena searched her father's ledgers. She found only 3 short notes. Red held through August. "Save the best heads. Keep separate." There was no variety name, no yield record, no explanation. Elena tested 100 seeds between damp paper towels. 3 days later, 82 had germinated. She calculated the shortage again. Without those 8 acres, the harvest could not cover the loan. Using the seed would violate the contract. Leaving the ground empty could cost her the farm anyway. On planting day, Elena filled the machine with commercial sorghum. When the hopper was nearly empty, she carried the red seed into the field. For several seconds, she stood beside the planter, reading the words on the lid. "Don't mix these." Then she poured the seed in. The red grains disappeared beneath thousands of pale ones. Elena closed the hopper. By sunset, the field looked perfectly uniform. Straight rows crossed the dark soil from the barn to the eastern fence. Nothing showed what she had done. But 12 days later, the first red stem broke through the ground. At first, the red plants looked like ordinary seedlings. Then they began to change. Their stems darkened. Their leaves widened. Some grew taller than the commercial sorghum, while others remained low and thick. They did not mature together. Elena counted them across the eastern field. 8 acres, exactly where she had poured her father's seed into the planter. From the road, the crop still looked normal. Up close, the difference was impossible to miss. Miles Carter noticed it first. He stopped beside the fence and pointed toward the red stems. "That isn't Mercer's variety." "I know. Then remove it before he sees it." Elena crouched beside one of the plants. "It's growing better than the others." "That won't matter to the cooperative." The commercial sorghum had emerged faster, but the red plants appeared stronger near the ground. Their stalks were thicker, and heavy wind had not bent them. Miles pulled at one. The plant held firm. He pulled harder. Still nothing. "Deep roots," he said. "Is that unusual?" "For a plant this young." He released the stalk. "Deep roots won't make it legal." Miles left, but Elena stayed. She dug beside a commercial plant first. Its roots spread through the loose surface soil, then stopped above the hard clay beneath it. She moved 6 feet away and dug beside a red plant. Several roots had entered cracks in the clay. One continued below the length of her shovel. Elena touched the soil around it. Cool. The soil beneath the commercial plant was already dry. For the next week, she checked both groups every morning. The pattern remained the same. The commercial crop grew faster. The red crop reached deeper. Then the temperature rose. By noon, the approved sorghum curled its leaves to conserve moisture. Some lower leaves began turning yellow. The red plants curled too, but each evening they opened again. Elena began recording the difference in her father's old notebook. Commercial rows, dry at 4 inches, red rows, moisture below clay, red leaves recover after sunset. She knew it was not proof, it was only a pattern, but her father had noticed the same pattern years earlier. In one ledger she found a line she had missed. "When the topsoil dries, watch the red." The next morning, Elena tied small pieces of white cloth around 12 of the strongest plants. She measured their height, marked the depth of their roots, photographed their leaves at noon and sunset. For the first time since returning to the farm, she was no longer thinking only about the bank. She wanted to know what the plants were doing. A truck slowed on the road. Elena looked up. Grant Mercer had stopped beside the eastern field. He stepped out and stared across the rows. The wind moved through the commercial sorghum in one smooth wave. The taller red plants remained visible above it. Grant entered the field. "What are those?" Elena closed the notebook. "Old sorghum seed." "Where did it come from?" "My father's storage room." Grant examined one of the dark stems. "You planted unapproved seed in a contracted field?" "I was short after the storm." "You should have planted fewer acres." "I needed the yield." Grant looked toward the scattered red rows. "How much?" "About 8 acres." His expression hardened. "Do not harvest anything until I return. They're handling the heat better." "That is not what I asked." He walked back toward his truck. "When are you coming back?" Grant opened the door. "With the field inspector." The truck disappeared down the road. Elena looked at the white cloth tied around the strongest plants. She had planted them to fill an empty section of land. Now they threatened the entire harvest. Grant returned the next morning with a field inspector. The inspector walked through the eastern rows without speaking. He compared the red plants with the commercial sorghum, cut several leaves, and photographed the uneven stalks. "How close are they to flowering?" he asked. "A few days," Elena said. Grant answered first. "Close enough to become a problem." The inspector opened one of the developing grain heads. "These are clearly off-type, different height, color, and maturity. But they're healthier," Elena said. "That isn't what this inspection measures." He marked several clusters with red flags. If the cooperative requires varietal purity, these plants must be removed before flowering. All 8 acres? Every identifiable plant? Elena looked toward the approved crop. Its leaves had curled tightly in the heat. The red plants stood above it, their upper leaves still open. What happens if I leave them? Grant folded his arms. The contract is canceled. The inspector returned to his vehicle. Grant remained behind. You have 48 hours, he said. After they left, Elena checked the irrigation pump. It started once, coughed, then stopped. She tried again. Nothing. The repair company could not send the replacement part for 4 days. By noon, the commercial sorghum had begun drying from the bottom upward. Elena walked to one of the flagged red plants and pushed a metal rod into the soil. It passed through the top layer, struck clay, then slipped into a narrow crack. When she pulled it out, the bottom 6 inches were damp. She tested the ground beneath a commercial plant nearby. The rod came out dry. Elena dug beside both plants. The commercial roots ended above the clay. The red roots continued through it. She returned to her father's ledgers and searched until she found one short entry. Well failed. Red still filled grain, saved separately. The note was 27 years old. Elena carried the ledger back outside. By sunset, the approved crop remained curled. The red leaves had opened again. She touched one of the developing heads. The kernels were still soft, but they were growing. The plants Grant called contamination were reaching water his approved crop could not find. A cooperative truck appeared on the road. 2 workers unloaded a yellow herbicide tank beside the eastern gate. Grant handed Elena the destruction notice. Tomorrow evening, he said. Not one red stalk left. Elena waited until the truck disappeared. Then she carried the herbicide tank into the shed and locked the door. She returned with a shovel, not to destroy the plants, but to find out how many she could save. Elena began with the plants closest to the road. She dug them out before sunrise and loaded them onto a trailer. From a distance, it looked like she was following Grant's order. But she did not destroy them. She carried the strongest plants to an abandoned calf lot behind the barn, where the trees blocked the view from the highway. Miles arrived as she was lowering the first root ball into the ground. You can't move sorghum this late, he said. I have 48 hours. That doesn't change the roots? Then help me save what we can. They transplanted 20 plants. By sunset, 8 had collapsed. Elena watered the survivors from the livestock tank, but the next morning only 6 remained upright. She stopped moving them. The largest cluster grew in the lowest corner of the field, hidden behind an old windbreak. Nearly an acre of red sorghum stood there. Elena cleared the commercial crop around it, creating an empty strip between the 2 varieties. Then she covered the developing grain heads with cloth bags. What does that do? Miles asked. Reduces the chance of pollen moving between them. Reduces? It's the best I can do. For 2 days, Elena removed every visible red plant near the road and left the hidden acre untouched. When Grant returned, most of the red flags stood over bare ground. He drove slowly along the fence, inspected the cleared rows, then continued toward the highway. Elena waited until his truck disappeared. That evening, she entered the hidden patch. The commercial crop beyond the clearing was turning pale. The red stalks had lost some lower leaves, but their grain heads were still filling. Elena opened her father's ledger. Beneath the note about the failed well, he had written, "Save the best heads from the lowest ground." She looked around. This was the lowest ground. Her father had not kept random seed. He had saved grain from the plants that survived dry years, again and again. The crop was uneven because it had never been bred for perfect rows. It had been selected for survival. Elena marked the strongest plants and recorded their position. Then she heard an engine behind the windbreak. Grant's truck entered through the rear gate. He stopped beside the hidden acre. The cloth bags and cleared strip made her plan obvious. "You said you would remove them," he said. "I removed the plants that threatened the contract rows. You kept an acre. It won't enter your delivery. That is not your decision. The seed belonged to my father. The field was planted with cooperative credit." Grant took photographs with his phone. Elena stepped between him and the crop. "The approved sorghum may not produce anything. That doesn't make this crop approved. It makes it the only one still alive." Grant looked past her. For the first time, he studied the red plants without calling them contamination. "How much seed will this acre produce?" he asked. Elena did not answer. Enough to plant next year? I don't know. Have you shown it to anyone? No. Grant lowered his phone. The cooperative is canceling your purchase agreement. You'll reject the commercial grain too? You violated the contract. The two crops are separated. You ignored a destruction order. He returned to his truck. The advance becomes due immediately. I can't pay it. Then the bank will decide what happens to the farm. Grant opened the door, then looked back at the hidden acre. Whatever you think those plants are worth, they won't save you. By sunset, the cancellation notice arrived. Elena read the amount twice. She did not have enough money to cover even half of it. Outside, the approved crop stood pale and empty. Behind the windbreak, the red grain heads bent beneath their own weight. Elena had saved the plants. Now she had to prove they were worth the price. Elena began harvesting the red grain by hand. The heads did not ripen together, so she cut only the darkest ones and labeled each plant. She stored them in sealed buckets. 3 days later, the barn smelled sour. Heat had built inside the grain, moisture covered the lids. White mold spread through several buckets. Elena dumped everything onto tarps. Nearly half the seed was ruined. Miles examined the grain. You stored it too wet. I thought it was dry. You guessed. Elena looked at the moldy pile. She had protected the crop from Grant, then nearly destroyed it herself. That night, she searched her father's ledgers again. This time, she found a page titled Red Seed. Keep dry below it were 4 instructions. Wait for the black layer. Hang heads separately. Never sack warm grain. Test before planting. Elena read the page twice. At the bottom was a name, Red Mercy, Ellis seed. The next morning she found Ruth Ellis in an assisted living home 40 miles away. Ruth recognized the grain head immediately. My family grew this before the reservoir took our farm. Why was it called Red Mercy? Because when the rain failed, something in that field usually survived. Ruth explained that the seed had never been uniform. Some plants matured early, some grew deeper roots, some produced less grain but survived extreme heat. Each drought, the Ellis family saved seed only from the plants that finished. My father wrote, "Don't mix these," Elena said. Ruth nodded. "Once you mix them with commercial grain, you lose track of the survivors. Is this variety valuable? One dry year proves nothing. What would prove it? That it survives again." Elena returned to the farm with the remaining seed. She tested each labeled batch separately. Some barely germinated. Others reached more than 80%. The strongest batches came from the plants nearest the low ground. She sent those seeds, her field notes and photographs to Dr. Hannah Cole at the State University. Hannah called 2 days later. "I can't tell you what the seed is worth," she said. "I need to know whether the difference was real." "It may be." "May be? One field and one season are not proof. What happens next?" "We tested against commercial varieties under controlled drought. There was no offer, no promise, only a test." That afternoon, Grant returned. He looked at the labeled seed trays on Elena's workbench. "I heard the university is involved. They're testing it. You still owe the cooperative." "I know." Grant picked up 1 bag of red seed. "A month ago, this was contamination," Elena said. "A month ago, no one else wanted it. And now?" Grant placed the bag down. "Now we wait for the results." Elena watched him leave. Ruth had said one season proved nothing, but Grant's interest proved something else. The people who ordered the crop destroyed were no longer sure it was worthless. The university planted the red seed in 6 test plots. 3 received normal irrigation, 3 received limited water. Commercial sorghum grew beside it in every plot. For the first month, the red plants looked unimpressive. They emerged unevenly. Some stayed short, others matured late. The commercial crop grew faster and formed cleaner rows. Grant called Elena after seeing the first report. "It looks exactly like I said," he told her. Inconsistent. Elena did not argue. The real test had not started yet. In July, the researchers reduced irrigation. Within 10 days, the commercial sorghum began curling its leaves before noon. The red plants curled too, but recovered each evening. After 3 weeks, several commercial plots stopped filling grain. The strongest red lines continued. Dr. Hannah Cole called Elena to the university farm. She led her between 2 marked plots. On the left, the commercial sorghum stood pale and thin. On the right, The red plants were uneven, but many still carried full-grain heads. "How much better?" Elena asked. "We don't have final numbers yet." "But the difference is real?" Hannah nodded. "Some of these lines are maintaining grain under water stress." Elena touched one of the red stalks. "Does that make it valuable?" "It makes it worth another trial." Hannah showed her the root samples. The commercial plants had formed most of their roots near the surface. Several red lines had pushed deeper through compacted soil. Not every plant carried the trait. That was why the crop looked uneven. But the best plants showed the same pattern Elena had recorded on her farm: deep roots, cooler soil, grain under drought. The university separated seed from 12 promising lines. Hannah placed the labeled bags on a table. "These are not a finished variety," she said. "They're breeding material." "What's the difference?" "A finished variety can be sold. Breeding material can create what companies want to sell." That afternoon, Elena received 3 calls. One came from a regional seed company. One came from a drought resilience research group. The third came from Grant Mercer. He arrived at the farm before sunset. This time, he did not bring a destruction notice. He brought a contract. "The cooperative can manage the seed," he said. "Cleaning, storage, multiplication." Elena turned the pages. In exchange, the cooperative wanted exclusive control over every future harvest. "You want all of it," she said. "We would carry the risk. You already tried to destroy it. We acted on the information available. You acted before looking." Grant closed the contract. "This crop has no market without processing and distribution. It also has no future if I sign away the seed. You still owe us." Elena looked toward the eastern field. The commercial sorghum had failed. The red patch had paid for nothing yet, but for the first time she held something Grant needed. "I'll repay the advance," she said. "With what?" "The same crop you called worthless." Grant's expression hardened. "You have no offer." "Not yet." The next morning Hannah called. A seed company wanted to fund larger trials across 3 dry regions. They would pay Elena for access to the selected lines and contract her farm to produce the original seed stock. The first payment would cover the cooperative debt. The full agreement could be worth far more if the traits remained stable. Elena looked at the 12 labeled bags on her table. One season had not made her rich. It had done something more important. It had turned her father's forgotten seed into something no one could dismiss again. The first offer arrived 3 days later. A regional seed company wanted access to the 12 selected lines. They offered Elena enough money to clear the cooperative debt and fund another year of trials. In return, they wanted full ownership of the seed. Hannah read the contract first. "They are buying control," she said, "not just grain." Elena looked at the amount. It was more money than the farm had earned in years. But once she signed, the company could decide who planted the seed, how it was bred, and whether Elena ever saw it again. She refused. The second company offered more. They wanted exclusive rights for 10 years. Elena refused again. Grant heard about the offers and returned with a new proposal. The cooperative would pay the debt, manage production, and give Elena a small royalty. "How small?" she asked. Grant named the percentage. Elena closed the folder. "You want the seed, the contracts, and the future harvests." "We have the infrastructure." "You had the same infrastructure when you ordered me to destroy it." Grant leaned forward. "You are one farmer with 12 bags of unproven seed, and you are here because those 12 bags matter." He left without answering. A week later, Hannah brought better news. The university had found a third partner. This company did not want to buy the seed outright. They proposed a licensing agreement. Elena would keep ownership of the original lines. Her farm would produce the foundation seed. The company would fund trials, cleaning, storage, and regional testing. If the seed became a commercial variety, Elena would receive payment from every licensed sale. The contract was not worth millions that day, but its projected value could reach that level if the drought traits held across multiple regions. Elena studied the final page. There was one condition. The original seed stock had to remain pure and traceable. She thought of the words on her father's jar. "Don't mix these." This time, she understood exactly what they meant. Elena signed. The first payment cleared the cooperative debt. The second stopped the bank review. Thomas Reed called that afternoon. "The foreclosure process is suspended," he said. "For how long?" "As long as the new contract remains active." After the call, Elena walked to the eastern field. The commercial crop stood dry and empty. Behind the windbreak, the red stalks were ready for harvest. Grant's truck stopped at the gate. He looked at the field, then at the new sign beside it. "Foundation seed. Authorized access only." "You should have taken our offer," he said. Elena shook her head. "You wanted the crop after someone else proved it mattered." Grant looked toward the red plants. "What is it worth now?" Elena considered the question. Not the first payment, not the projected royalties, not the number printed in the contract. The real value was that the seed still belonged to the person who had saved it. "More than you offered," she said. Then she closed the gate. The next spring, Elena planted the red seed in separate blocks. Each line had its own number. No mixed rows, no unmarked jars. The university planted matching plots in 2 other dry regions. The company funded soil testing, moisture sensors, and weekly measurements. For months, nothing dramatic happened. The commercial sorghum grew faster. It stood taller. Its rows looked cleaner. Then the rain stopped. At Elena's farm, the shallow well failed first. 2 weeks later, the upper field began turning pale. The same pattern appeared at the other test sites. Commercial plants lost grain. Several red lines failed too, but 4 lines kept producing. Not perfectly, not everywhere, enough to confirm the first season had not been an accident. Hannah called Elena after the final harvest. "The same 4 lines performed across all 3 sites. Is that enough?" "Enough to begin commercial multiplication." The company increased the contract. Elena's farm would produce foundation seed for growers in 5 states. The university would continue testing. Every licensed bag would carry a royalty tied to the original seed stock. The projected value crossed 7 figures. Not as one payment, as contracts, production rights, and future sales. Grant Mercer learned the number before Elena announced it. He arrived with 2 members of the cooperative board. This time, they entered through the front gate and waited for permission. "We want to discuss a production partnership," Grant said. Elena looked at the men behind him. "A year ago, you canceled my contract. We made a commercial decision. You ordered me to destroy the seed. We did not know what it was. You did not try to know." Grant placed a folder on the table. The cooperative now wanted permission to clean and store Red Mercy seed. Elena read the proposal. The price was fair. The control was not. She crossed out the exclusivity clause. She added independent testing. Then she required the cooperative to reserve part of its storage capacity for small growers participating in the program. Grant read the changes. "You're asking us to change how we operate." "No," Elena said. "I'm telling you how you work with my seed." He looked at the contract for a long time. Then he signed. By harvest, trucks lined the road outside Ward Farm. They were not there for ordinary grain. They carried sealed, numbered seed lots from the 4 strongest lines. Elena watched the first truck leave beneath the same gate where Grant had once delivered the herbicide tank. Thomas Reed from the bank arrived that afternoon. He carried the farm's release papers. "The remaining loan has been paid," he said. Elena signed the final page. For the first time in years, Ward Farm belonged to no bank, no cooperative, and no buyer. That evening, Hannah showed her the latest projections. If the next trials held, the licensing agreements could be worth several $1,000,000 over the following seasons. Elena closed the folder. The number mattered, but it was not the part she kept looking at. Beside the financial estimate was a map showing every region where Red Mercy would be tested next. Places already losing crops to heat, places where farmers could not afford another failed season. Her father had saved 1 jar. Elena had saved 1 acre. Now the seed was leaving the farm without leaving her control. For the first time, Red Mercy was no longer surviving in secret. 1 year after Grant marked the red plants for destruction, Elena stood in the same field. The red flags were gone. In their place, white signs identified 4 seed lines: RM3, RM7, RM9, RM12. Researchers, growers, and seed buyers walked between the rows. They examined grain heads, checked moisture readings, and compared the plants with the commercial sorghum beside them. The drought trial had entered its final week. The commercial rows were pale and thin. Red Mercy was not untouched. Some leaves had dried, Several plants had failed, but the 4 selected lines still carried grain. Hannah gathered the visitors near the test plots. "These results do not mean the crop can survive without water," she said. "They show that certain lines maintained production under conditions where the comparison crop lost most of its yield." Elena appreciated the careful language. No miracles, only evidence. A representative from the seed company handed her the final multiplication agreement. The company would license the 4 lines for regional production. Ward Farm would remain the source of the foundation seed. The projected value of the contracts, royalties, and production work exceeded $3 million over the next several seasons. Grant stood at the edge of the group. He waited until the others moved toward the next plot. "You proved me wrong," he said. Elena looked at the red rose. "The plants did that. I followed the contract. You followed it before you looked at the field." Grant did not argue. He glanced toward the equipment shed. "The herbicide tank is still in there?" "Yes." "You kept it?" To remember how close this came to disappearing, at the far end of the plot, a young farmer asked Hannah whether seed would be available for small farms. Elena answered before Hannah could. "A portion of every increase will be reserved for regional trials and independent growers." The company representative turned toward her. "That volume was not included in the first projection. It was included in the agreement I signed." He checked the document, then nodded. Elena had refused to save the farm by losing control of the seed. Red Mercy would be licensed. It would not be locked away. That afternoon, the visitors left with sample reports instead of seed. Every bag remained numbered, sealed, and recorded. When the field was quiet, Elena returned to the barn. The original glass jar sat inside a cabinet. Only a handful of red grains remained. On the lid, her father's faded warning was still visible. "Don't mix these." Elena placed the first royalty statement beside it. The number was larger than every debt her father had left behind. But the money was not what gave the jar meaning. Its value came from decades of farmers saving the plants that survived. Her father had protected the seed without knowing whether anyone would ever want it. Elena had protected it when everyone told her it was a mistake. Outside, the evening wind moved through the test field. The plants did not stand in perfect rows. Some were tall, some were short, some had matured earlier than the rest. Once that variation had made the crop look worthless. Now it was the reason companies, researchers, and farmers had come to Ward Farm. Elena closed the cabinet and walked outside. At the eastern gate, she stopped beside the exact place where Grant had once left the herbicide tank. A new sign stood there now, Red Mercy Foundation Seed 1. Season earlier, they had ordered her to destroy the crop because it was different. Now it was worth millions for exactly the same reason. The first commercial bags of Red Mercy sold out before planting season ended. Farmers from dry counties ordered more than Ward Farm could produce. Elena expanded carefully. She leased nearby land, but every seed lot remained separate and traceable. The 4 selected lines were never mixed. Grant's cooperative handled cleaning and storage under Elena's terms. For the first time, small growers received the same seed access as large buyers. Then Ruth Ellis came to the farm. Elena walked her to the eastern field in a wheelchair. Red Mercy stretched beyond the old windbreak in numbered blocks. Ruth held one grain head in both hands. "My father would not believe this," she said. "Mine wouldn't either." "He might." Ruth looked at Elena. "He kept it, didn't he?" Elena nodded. "One jar. Decades of selection. One warning written on the lid." Ruth smiled. "Then he believed someone would understand eventually." That afternoon, the seed company announced the final regional results. Red Mercy did not outperform every commercial variety. It was not suitable for every farm, but under severe water stress, the 4 selected lines maintained enough grain to justify full commercial release. The licensing agreements expanded. The projected value passed $5 million. Reporters arrived the next week. They photographed Elena beside the red field and asked when she knew the crop would succeed. "I didn't," she said. "Then why did you save it?" "Because it was still alive when everything approved around it was failing." Grant stood near the storage building listening. After the interview, he approached her. "The cooperative board wants to name the new processing wing after Ward Farm." Elena shook her head. "Name it after the Ellis family." Grant hesitated. "Most buyers know your name." They saved the seed first. A month later, the new sign went up. Ellis Seed Preservation Center, Ruth saw a photograph before she died that winter. Elena placed a copy beside the original jar in the farm office. The farm was now debt-free, the seed contracts were secure, and Grant Mercer no longer entered through the gate without asking. But Elena did not remove the old red flags from the barn. She kept one beside the jar. A reminder that the difference between worthless and valuable was sometimes nothing more than whether someone looked closely enough. 5 years later, Elena still walked the eastern field before sunrise. Ward Farm had changed. The old equipment shed had become a seed testing room. Numbered plots replaced the failing commercial rows. Farmers from across the region came each season to study Red Mercy under heat and limited irrigation. But Elena kept the first acre untouched. The original stalks were gone, yet the windbreak, the dry irrigation ditch, and the hard clay remained. This was where Grant had planted the red flags. It was where Elena had chosen not to obey. That morning, a group of young farmers waited beside the field. Most worked small farms in counties where wells were dropping and summer temperatures were rising. Elena handed each of them a sealed bag of seed. Red Mercy will not solve every problem, she told them. It may fail in soil or climates it was never selected for. One farmer turned the bag in his hands. Then why give it to us? Because resilience is not a promise that nothing dies. Elena looked toward the numbered plots. It means something survives long enough for us to learn from it. The Red Mercy program now included several varieties developed from the original population. Some matured early, some produced better grain, others carried the deep-rooting trait researchers had first noticed on Ward Farm. Together, the contracts had generated millions of dollars, but Elena never sold the original seed stock. Every agreement required companies to return part of each new line to a public conservation collection. Small growers received seed at reduced cost. Farmers were allowed to save seed for their own fields. The companies had resisted those terms. Elena had refused to sign without them. She had not saved Red Mercy so it could disappear behind another locked door. After the visitors left, Elena returned to the farmhouse. The original glass jar sat on her desk between two objects, her father's ledger, and one faded red flag. Only 7 grains remained inside the jar. Elena no longer planted them. Their descendants now grew across thousands of acres. Those 7 belonged to the past, to the Ellis family, to her father, and to every farmer who had selected a surviving plant without knowing whether anyone would care. Grant arrived near sunset. He was older now and no longer managed the cooperative. He placed a small envelope on Elena's desk. Inside was the original destruction notice. "I found it while clearing my office," he said. Elena read the final line. "All unidentified plants must be eliminated before flowering." "You were doing your job," she said. "I was protecting a system. From 1 acre of red sorghum? From anything the system couldn't classify." Grant looked at the jar. "We nearly destroyed it because it didn't match what we already understood." Elena placed the notice beside the red flag. "No, you nearly destroyed it because nobody stopped to ask why it was still alive." Grant nodded once and left. Elena remained at the desk as darkness settled over the farm. The approved crop from that first season had vanished long ago. No one remembered its variety number or how much it had been expected to produce. The crop marked for destruction had outlived the contract, the debt, and the people who had called it worthless. Elena closed her father's ledger. On its final page, beneath his old notes, she had written one sentence: "Never confuse uniformity with strength." Outside, Red Mercy moved beneath the evening wind. The plants were still uneven. Some stood tall, some bent low, some would produce more grain than others. They had never become valuable because someone made them identical. They became valuable because, when the rain stopped, they did not all fail in the same way.